Snow-dusted passengers in the Juneau airport froze as Atlas, the battle-tested German shepherd who had followed a Navy SEAL through war, suddenly lunged at an elderly woman's blue suitcase. His growl tore through the terminal, sharp and trembling, as if he had sensed something no human could feel. Nathan Cole tightened his grip on the leash, but Atlas refused to budge. He clawed at the zipper, barking with a frantic urgency that made strangers stumble backward in fear. The suitcase didn't move, but something inside it did. Atlas pressed his nose to the fabric, whining, a low, desperate sound Nathan hadn't heard since the battlefield. Security officers rushed in. People whispered, "A bomb? Drugs? Something alive?" When the zipper was finally pulled open, every breath in the terminal stopped, because what lay inside was more heartbreaking, more unthinkable than anything they had imagined. If you believe heroes come in many forms, tell me this. What do you think Atlas sensed in that moment before the truth was revealed? Comment your thoughts, hit like, and subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after they end. The storm had begun its slow crawl over Juneau, an early winter dusk where the sky sagged under the weight of snow that had not yet fallen but promised to. Inside the airport terminal, the world felt suspended in a soft, trembling hush. Christmas wreaths hung along the tall glass windows, their lights flickering against the reflection of travelers dragging suitcases and trying to outrun the cold. The air smelled faintly of pine air freshener and the metallic tang of melting ice. Nathan Cole sat quietly on a bench near Gate 4, elbows resting on his knees, gloved hands clasped loosely as if holding something fragile and invisible. His presence blended into the surrounding crowd, yet carried the unmistakable stillness of someone who had spent years learning to vanish in plain sight. The Navy SEAL uniform he wore wasn't ceremonial, just a simple, heavy-duty jacket and boots, clothing built for survival rather than presentation. The only thing on him that seemed untouched by war was the dog resting at his feet. Atlas, 5-year-old German shepherd, black and tan coat thick with winter sheen, lay with his chin on Nathan's boot, one ear slightly raised, the other relaxed. He wasn't sleeping. Atlas never truly slept in public places. He watched, listened, absorbed. A creature built of devotion and instinct, shaped by training but sharpened by experience. There was a calm intelligence behind his amber eyes, the kind that suggested he'd already judged the room and found it acceptable. For now. Nathan exhaled slowly, his breath leaving a cloud that drifted upward and dissolved. His flight home was delayed another hour, another Christmas slipping through numb fingers. He wondered whether his mother would leave the porch light on for him, like she used to, back when he was just a boy racing home from snowball fights instead of returning from dust and fire missions halfway across the world. The ache in his chest tightened, half nostalgia, half regret. Atlas nudged his boot gently, sensing the shift in him. Nathan glanced down, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm all right," he murmured, though Atlas knew better. It wasn't in the nature of warriors to admit emptiness, but Atlas understood it anyway. He'd learned Nathan's silences, the ghosts that flickered behind his eyes at unexpected moments. They had walked too many roads together for pretending. A boarding announcement echoed across the terminal, followed by the sound of a child crying, a suitcase zipper jamming, laughter ringing from a family in matching red sweaters. The ordinary rhythms of travel. Nathan's fingers absently brushed the fabric of Atlas's harness, habit, reassurance, ritual. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the warmth of his mother's fireplace, the smell of cinnamon rolls, the sound of his sister's kids running through the house. He imagined stepping inside like someone returning from a fog, because that's what coming, home always felt like, a waking. But even as the thought formed, Atlas's body stiffened. The dog lifted his head with a slow, deliberate motion. His ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as he inhaled sharply. A quiet warning rumbled in his throat, so soft Nathan almost wasn't sure he heard it. "What is it, boy?" Nathan whispered, his voice tautening. Atlas rose to all fours, muscles tightening beneath his coat. His gaze locked on something across the terminal, something Nathan hadn't noticed yet. People were shuffling through security, removing shoes, lifting luggage onto conveyor belts. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Yet Atlas's stance told a different story. Then Nathan saw her. A small, elderly woman shuffled through the security line, her frame swallowed by a long, faded coat, the color of plums. a knitted hat pulled low over her thinning silver hair. She dragged behind her a scuffed blue suitcase, its wheels squeaking in protest, its fabric darkened at the edges as if soaked and dried too many times. Her face was creased not just with age, but with a tremor of fear, an unsettled tightness around the mouth, a flicker in her eyes as though she expected someone to step out of the shadows and take something from her, or punish her. Nathan straightened slightly. Nothing about her stood out, yet she moved like someone carrying more than the weight of a single piece of luggage. Atlas saw more. His instincts, honed through rescue missions and high-risk operations, caught what the human eye missed. He let out a low growl, quiet but undeniable, tail stiff, paws planted firmly. "Easy," Nathan murmured, but it was too late. Atlas lunged, not violently, but with a sudden sharp pull, driving toward the old woman and the suitcase as if guided by a force older than training. The leash snapped tight in Nathan's hand. A ripple of shock spread through the security line. A toddler clung to her father's jacket. A businessman stepped aside, startled. "Ma'am, hold on," Nathan called out, trying to rein Atlas back without alarming her. But the elderly woman, Martha Ellingwood, as Nathan would later learn, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened, full of dread rather than confusion. Her grip on the suitcase tightened with bone-white knuckles. I didn't do anything," she stammered, voice trembling like thin glass in cold wind. Atlas didn't bark yet, but his body shook with suppressed urgency, an urgency Nathan had seen only twice. Once in Afghanistan, when Atlas sensed a wounded soldier beneath rubble before anyone else knew he was alive, and once in Colorado, when Atlas detected a missing child trapped beneath a collapsed shed. The dog stepped toward the suitcase again, nose hovering just above the faded fabric. His inhalation was sharp, deliberate. His pupils widened. Another growl tore from him, louder this time, vibrating with warning. And finally, he barked. One explosive, commanding bark that cracked through the terminal like the shatter of ice on a frozen lake. Heads turned instantly. Security guards snapped to attention. Several passengers recoiled. The blue suitcase trembled slightly under Atlas's paws. Nathan felt the temperature of the moment drop. Not from the winter storm trying to force its way through the sliding doors, but from something deeper, something wrong. "Ma'am," Nathan began more gently, stepping closer, "is everything all right? Are you hurt?" Martha shook her head too quickly. Her lips quivered, breath stuttering. I'm fine. Just cold, sir. Just trying to catch my flight." Her eyes darted around the terminal like someone afraid of being seen. Her voice carried the brittle desperation of a person repeating a line rehearsed under duress. Nathan crouched beside Atlas, placing a steady hand on the dog's shoulder. Atlas's muscles thrummed with tension, his breath short and hot against the suitcase. "It's just a bag," Martha whispered, though her own gaze betrayed her words. No, Nathan realized, she wasn't afraid Atlas might hurt her. She was afraid Atlas might discover something. Another bark split the air, this one frantic, rising from a place between terror and hope. Atlas pressed his weight against the suitcase, claws scraping the floor, tail stiff as iron. The security officers began to approach, murmuring into radios. Passengers were ushered backward slowly, confusion and dread spiraling through the crowd. Martha clutched the handle of the suitcase so tightly that the veins across her hands stood like blue rivers beneath her papery skin. She whispered, barely audible, "Please, don't open it." Nathan's pulse thudded. People don't say that unless they fear the truth. He rose, positioning himself between Atlas and Martha, speaking softly but firmly. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "I can't," she whispered, voice cracking. "If I let go, they'll know." "Who will know?" But before she could answer, her strength failed. Her grip loosened. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. She backed away one trembling step, and the suitcase shifted again. A tiny movement. Soft. Almost imagined, but not imagined by Atlas. The German shepherd barked with raw desperation, as though time itself were slipping away. Nathan swallowed, a chill crawling down his spine. Whatever was inside that suitcase, it wasn't just luggage. Behind him, the airport intercom droned on about boarding procedures, utterly oblivious to the storm gathering at Gate 4. A storm not written in clouds, but carried inside a battered blue suitcase and the terrified eyes of an old woman who seemed to know exactly what darkness she'd been forced to drag through this terminal. Nathan stepped forward. "Atlas," he said quietly. "Show me." The dog answered with a single sharp bark, a sound that would change everything. The moment Atlas's final bark pierced the air, the terminal seemed to lose its balance. Conversations faltered, footsteps slowed. Even the distant whir of luggage belts seemed to hush itself. A single bright fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a jittery glow on the battered blue suitcase, as if the universe were leaning in, waiting for someone to dare open it. Nathan stepped forward with the slow caution of a man who had disarmed explosives and walked into ambushes. But this wasn't the tension of war. This was stranger, more fragile, dangerous in a different way. Beside him, Atlas stood taut as a bowstring, amber eyes burning with urgency that could not be ignored. The elderly woman, Martha Ellingwood, finally released the suitcase handle. Her hand slipped free as though it weighed as much as guilt itself. She stumbled back a full step, pressing trembling fingers against her lips. Up close, she looked even more fragile, mid-70s, small-framed, cheeks hollowed by winter and worry, layers of worn clothes hanging off her like wilted petals. Her gray eyes shimmered with tears that refused to fall. A TSA officer hurried over, a man in his late 40s named Gordon Pierce, a veteran of airport security with a sturdy build, a weathered jawline, and a patience shaped by decades of dealing with frantic travelers. He approached cautiously, glancing at Atlas with a mixture of respect and unease. "What's going on here?" His voice was steady, but his eyes flicked to the trembling suitcase. "Why is your dog alerting?" "Because something inside is alive," Nathan answered, though he wasn't entirely certain until the words left his mouth. But Atlas's instincts had never failed him, not once in 5 years of missions. A few passengers gasped. Someone whispered, "Is it an animal?" Someone else murmured, "A bomb that moves?" Martha shook her head violently. "No, no, no, please. Don't open it here. Don't." Her voice dissolved into breathless sobs. She shuffled back as if expecting danger to burst out the moment the zipper moved. Nathan softened his tone. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Did someone force you to take this?" Martha's lips quivered before she forced out a cracked whisper. "I was told, if I looked inside, I would die. I needed the money. And they said it was just clothes. Just clothes." Her voice collapsed. Those last words broke into a sob that spilled from her chest like something finally shattered free. Gordon exchanged a grim look with Nathan. "We're opening it, but we do it carefully." 2 more TSA officers arrived, including Officer Lila Hart, a young agent in her late 20s with sharp features softened by nervous empathy. She stepped beside the suitcase, tugging on gloves with trembling hands. This was not the routine bag check she trained for. This was something else entirely. Atlas let out a soft whine, lowering his head toward the suitcase as if pleading for someone to hurry. Nathan knelt and steadied the dog with a gentle touch on the shoulder. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "We'll get there." But Atlas didn't relax. His body quivered with an urgency that went beyond training. The same urgency he once displayed when he sensed a young Marine buried beneath 7 inches of desert rubble. Alive, fading, out of time. Gordon crouched beside the suitcase. His hands hovered over the zipper, hesitating for a breath, perhaps a prayer. Then he drew it open. A faint gasp rippled outward as the zipper slid, tooth by tooth, peeling away the thin boundary between fear and truth. A sour, unfamiliar smell drifted out, cold, stale, tinged with something chemical. Lila swallowed hard. When Gordon lifted the lid, the world seemed to fold inward. Inside, curled like a fragile blossom crushed beneath winter frost, was a little girl no more than 2 years old. Her cheeks were chalk pale, her lips trembling violet, her curly chestnut hair fanned across a pink blanket, faded and frayed at the edges as though loved once but long neglected. Her tiny chest rose in weak, uneven breaths. "She's alive," Lila whispered, voice cracked with disbelief. "Barely." Nathan's heartbeat kicked into high gear. The floor under him felt suddenly unsteady. The cold of Alaska seemed to seep into his bones. He had seen wounded soldiers, children lost in conflict zones, civilians caught in crossfire, but nothing prepared him for the sight of a helpless toddler packed into a suitcase like an object. Martha let out a wail that echoed through the terminal. She fell to her knees, clutching at her chest as if she wanted the floor to swallow her guilt whole. I didn't know. God forgive me. Atlas stepped forward, lowering his head until his nose touched the edge of the suitcase. A deep, sorrowful whine slipped from him, soft, protective, mournful. He sniffed gently at the girl, tail low, ears tilted forward with a tenderness normally hidden beneath his warrior exterior. That's enough to evacuate the area, Gordon said shakily. Call paramedics now. But Nathan was already leaning forward. Her breathing is shallow, hypothermic. We need a medic on site within seconds. Lila radioed frantically, her voice blistered with urgency. Nathan gently pressed 2 fingers against the child's wrist. A faint pulse fluttered like a frightened bird. She needed heat, oxygen, touch, something to anchor her to life. Stay with us, sweetheart, he whispered. We've got you. The girl didn't respond, but a soft tremor pulsed through her tiny hand, where it lay limp against the blanket. And then something else caught Nathan's eye. A small piece of fabric tucked beside the child's leg, darkened, stiff, stained with a faintly sweet medicinal scent. Nathan plucked it carefully. Atlas's nose twitched instantly. He inhaled deeply, memorizing the scent with a sharp, instinctive focus. That's anesthetic residue? Lila asked hesitantly. Nathan nodded grimly. Looks like it. Someone sedated her. Atlas growled low, not threatening, but filled with a raw hatred for whoever dared harm a child. As paramedics arrived, 2 swift-moving responders named Michael Rowan and Hannah Pierce, the world inside the terminal shifted into organized chaos. Michael, mid-30s, calm-eyed with steady hands shaped by years on rescue squads, lifted the girl with surprising gentleness. Hannah, younger, with a quick mind sharpened by academic rigor and field emergencies alike, wrapped her in thermal blankets. She's cold to the core, Hannah murmured, but she's fighting. Nathan stepped back, letting the professionals work, but Atlas refused to move away. The dog paced beside the stretcher until Michael offered a nod of acknowledgement, as though silently agreeing that Atlas had earned the right to stay close. As they wheeled the girl toward the exit, Nathan caught Martha's gaze. Her eyes were oceans of regret and terror. I swear, she choked, I didn't know it was a child. They told me. They told me if I checked the bag, if I opened it, her voice snapped. Please, you must believe me. Nathan's jaw tightened. He believed her fear, but fear didn't absolve the truth. We'll figure out who forced you into this, he said quietly. But right now, that child needs every second she can get. Martha nodded brokenly as Lila escorted her toward a quiet room for questioning. The paramedics lifted the girl's stretcher through the sliding doors. Cold wind pushed into the terminal, bringing with it the scent of snow and something else. Possibility, danger, a path that had just begun. Atlas stood in the doorway, staring after the ambulance as though he knew this was no accident, no isolated event. It was the beginning of something much darker. Nathan rested a hand on the dog's back, feeling the tension beneath the fur. We're not done, he murmured, not even close. Atlas's ears twitched. Outside, sirens wailed into the winter air, carrying the child toward the thin line between life and loss. And in Nathan's hand, the scrap of anesthetic-soaked fabric fluttered like a small, sinister clue. One Atlas would soon follow into the shadows. Snow fell across Juneau like a quiet confession, soft, persistent, blanketing the world in white as if trying to hide the darkness that had slipped through its streets. The ambulance carrying Rosie Lane had already vanished into the storm by the time Nathan and Atlas stepped outside the airport terminal, but the echo of its siren lingered in Nathan's ears like a pulse he could not silence. He stood still for a moment, feeling the cold settle into his bones, then looked down. Atlas was already staring up at him, eyes bright with purpose. "Let's head to the hospital," Nathan murmured. "We need to know if she's still fighting." The hospital lights glowed warm against the freezing evening when they arrived. Nathan had been in plenty of emergency rooms throughout his military career, but children's wards were different. They carried a heaviness that pressed on the soul rather than the body. As he stepped into the pediatric emergency unit, his breath faltered slightly. Memories of missions gone wrong, of civilians caught in crossfire, of small bodies carried out of collapsing shelters, flashed through his mind like shadows sliding across old wounds. Nurses hurried past with clipboards, the air thick with antiseptic scent and murmured urgency. A paramedic Nathan recognized from earlier, Michael Rowan, approached him, peeling off his gloves. Up close, Michael looked older than his mid-30s, deep lines carved around his eyes, hair prematurely graying at the temples. He carried the weight of someone who had saved hundreds and lost just as many. "She's stabilized for now," Michael said quietly. "Faint pulse, hypothermic, sedated. But she's a fighter." He paused, gaze softening as it drifted toward the curtained-off room where Rosie lay. "Kids surprise you sometimes. They break your heart and heal it in the same second." Nathan nodded. He wanted to go to her, to see her breathing with his own eyes, to reassure himself that Atlas's desperate warning had not come too late. But there was more to do. Much more. The scrap of fabric in his pocket seemed to burn with significance. Atlas sniffed the air anxiously, then nudged the door with his nose. The dog's restlessness tugged at Nathan. They weren't meant to linger here. Not yet. Nathan glanced toward the window. Snow battered against the glass, like 1,000 white fingerprints. "We need to track whoever did this," he said to Michael. "There's a trail out there, and Atlas is ready." Michael gave a firm nod. "Then go. The police are gathering at the south lot. They'll want you with them." He hesitated, adding softly, "Thank you for finding her when you did." Nathan didn't answer. He let Atlas lead him back outside. The south parking lot stretched behind the airport like a frozen maze. Rows of parked cars buried in snow, security lights flickering under the weight of wind. A patrol car idled near the entrance, exhaust curling into the frigid air. A tall police sergeant approached them, introducing himself as Sergeant David Halverson, a 40-something officer with the squared shoulders of a former Marine, a thick beard frosted with snow, and steady eyes that belonged to someone who'd seen the worst of human behavior, but refused to be hardened by it. "We got the call about your dog," Halverson said. "He picked up something?" Nathan pulled the scrap of fabric from his pocket. "Anesthetic residue." Atlas keyed on it immediately. Halverson nodded. "We swept the airport for visual clues, nothing conclusive. But if you say the trail starts here..." Atlas didn't wait for permission. He plunged forward, nose low to the ground, tail stiff with urgency. The dog moved with a focused intensity Nathan knew well. This was the same posture Atlas took when tracking insurgents or searching for missing soldiers. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they followed him. The dog led them between rows of cars until he suddenly stopped at the far end of the lot, thrusting his nose toward a patch of disturbed snow. Halverson crouched beside him. "Footprints," the sergeant muttered. "Fresh. Not large, narrow, short. Someone light on their feet." The steps shifted direction erratically, as if the person had been glancing over their shoulder the entire time. Next to them were faint drag marks, something heavy in tow. "A suitcase?" Nathan murmured. Halverson nodded grimly. Atlas continued forward until they reached a spot near the exit gate where the tracks abruptly ended. A dark patch stained the snow. "Oil." "They switched vehicles here," Halverson said. "Probably used a getaway car." Nathan scanned the area. A security camera perched on a tall metal pole, its lens angled toward the exit lane. "Does that thing record wide angle?" Halverson tapped his radio. "Dispatch, pull footage from camera S12, 10 minutes before Suitcase recovery until now." A moment later, his radio crackled. "Copy that, Sergeant. Sending clip to your tablet." Halverson opened the tablet, and the grainy recording flickered on screen. A hooded figure appeared, small frame, quick movements. The person dragged the suitcase behind them, constantly checking the surroundings. Martha appeared shortly afterward, shuffling into frame. The hooded figure approached her. Nathan watched Martha's handshake with the stranger, hesitant, afraid. He watched the stranger press the suitcase handle into her grip. Martha nodded reluctantly. "Meaning she didn't pick the bag up by accident," Halverson said. "She was coerced." "Or threatened," Nathan added. But the next part of the footage made the air freeze more than the snow ever could. The hooded figure turned toward the camera. The hood slipped just enough for the light to catch her face. A pale, angular face. High cheekbones. sharp eyes beneath dark lashes, a cold half-smile. She looked young, late, 20s, maybe early 30s, yet there was a calculating stillness in her expression. Halverson sucked in a breath. "You've got to be kidding me." "Who is she?" Nathan asked. The sergeant zoomed in. "Clara Monroe." The name hit the air like a warning shot. Clara Monroe, leader of a child trafficking ring, operating along the Alaska-Canada corridor. No one had seen her in over a year. Rumors claimed she was ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. A woman with a childhood marked by abandonment and a history marked by vengeance. Someone who had learned early that the world only rewarded those willing to take. Nathan stared at the frozen image of her face. There was no remorse there, just the poise of someone who believed she was always 3 steps ahead. Halverson pocketed the tablet. "If Monroe's bag ended up here, we're dealing with more than just a kidnapping. This is her operation." Atlas barked sharply, breaking their silence. He had circled to the rear of the lot, where a faded tire track curved toward the highway. Nathan ran a hand along the dog's neck. "He wants to follow." Halverson hesitated. "It's getting dark. Roads are iced over, and if Monroe is armed, she won't get far in a storm like this," Nathan said. "And she has a pattern. She always moves victims quickly." Halverson studied Nathan for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll follow the trail. Get in." As the police SUV pulled out of the lot, Atlas pressed his head against the cold window, watching the drifting snow with unblinking focus. Nathan glanced at him, seeing not just a dog, but a soldier, a friend, a living compass pointing toward danger and truth. "You're leading us somewhere, aren't you?" Nathan whispered. Atlas's ears twitched, his breath fogged the glass. And beyond the smudged reflection, the dark highway stretched forward like a path carved through fate itself. The storm deepened as the police SUV pushed north along the narrow forest road, headlights cutting through curtains of falling snow. The world outside shrank into a tunnel of white, where the dark silhouettes of pines rose like watchmen along the ridgeline. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on Atlas in the back. The German shepherd stood the entire ride, pressed against the window, breath fogging the glass in impatient bursts. Every few seconds, his tail stiffened, his ears shot forward, and he let out a low rumble that vibrated like a warning carried in his bones. Sergeant Halverson gripped the wheel tighter with each mile, his knuckles pale against the leather. "Your dog's got instincts like I've never seen," he muttered, half admiration, half unease. "If he's right about where they went, this storm won't slow them down. They know these woods." Nathan nodded, though he wasn't fully listening. His mind drifted to Rosie, lying in a hospital bed, wrapped in blankets she couldn't feel, her breaths fluttering like a candle stubbornly burning in a draft. Her tiny face haunted him, an image stitched to his conscience, overlapping with the children he'd failed to save overseas. Atlas sensed Nathan slipping inward. He released a soft yelp, snapping him back. "I'm here," Nathan whispered. "I'm with you." The road narrowed further, until it became barely more than a snow-clogged path. Halverson slowed, pointing toward faint ridges cut into the snow. Tire tracks, fresh, sharp-edged, heading deeper into the woods. "They turned off here," Halverson said. "We go the rest on foot." Nathan checked his gear. Tactical knife, flashlight, radio earpiece. Nothing heavy, he wasn't on a military op, but muscle memory made him move like he was. He clipped Atlas's harness and stepped out into the brittle cold. The forest swallowed sound instantly. Not even the wind dared move among the trees. Atlas lowered his nose to the ground, following the scent that tied everything together. The anesthetic-soaked fabric, the suitcase, the escape car. His paws sank into powdery snow, yet he marched forward with certainty. Nathan followed close, his steps quiet, deliberate, steps shaped by years of stalking enemy lines under moonless skies. After 20 minutes of trudging through the woods, the trees parted to reveal a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin, old timber, moss-coated roof, no lights, no smoke rising from the chimney. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time. But Atlas stopped dead, muscles rigid, a growl building in his throat. Nathan's breath fanned through the air in white streams. This is it. The cabin wasn't just a hiding place, it was a cage. Halverson crouched beside Nathan. "We wait for backup." "No," Nathan whispered. "If they hear sirens, they'll run. Or worse." Atlas growled again, shifting toward the back of the cabin. Nathan tapped Halverson's shoulder. "Let's circle quietly. Seal approach." Halverson hesitated, then nodded. Nathan and Atlas slipped through the trees like shadows. The snow muffled their steps, each movement precise. Nathan kept low, leaning into Atlas's natural silence. His hand brushed the dog's back, steadying him, guiding him, trusting him. A faint noise drifted from within the cabin, a muffled cry, quickly smothered. Nathan froze mid-step. A child, still alive. His pulse thundered. Atlas pressed his body to the cabin wall, ears lifted, nostrils flaring. Nathan leaned close and whispered, "Show me." The dog nudged toward the corner, where a board near the foundation had been disturbed. Beneath it, he sniffed again and let out a low whine. Someone was under there, but they weren't alone inside. A voice erupted from within the cabin, a woman, sharp and commanding. "Pack it up. We're leaving now. Canada border in under an hour. Move!" Nathan recognized her instantly from the footage. Clara Monroe. She was younger than most traffickers he had encountered, late 20s if that, but cruelty had aged her eyes. Clara Monroe was tall, slender, with dark hair cut sharply around her jaw, and a presence that filled the room even without seeing her. She had grown up in the foster system, shuffled through 12 homes before she turned 18, taught by circumstance that survival meant turning your back on everyone else. Her criminal record was thin, almost spotless. She had learned early to commit crimes without leaving fingerprints. Inside the cabin, another man, a burly figure with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck, grunted as he shoved equipment into a duffel bag. Evan Rourke, early 30s, Clara's enforcer, former truck mechanic, former petty thief, now deep in a trade far darker. His heavy boots paced across the floorboards, shaking snow dust loose in tiny puffs. "Car's ready," Evan growled. "Storm's getting worse. We gotta move." Clara snapped, "Not without checking the kid. She needs another dose." At that, Atlas's growl erupted louder, and Nathan clamped a hand around the dog's harness. "Easy," he whispered. But there was nothing easy about hearing a child treated like cargo. Halverson's voice crackled quietly in Nathan's earpiece. "Backup is 2 minutes out. Hold position." Nathan stared at the boards beneath the cabin floor. Atlas scratched the softened edge, whining. "Someone's under there," Nathan whispered. He lowered himself slowly, lifting the board just enough to peer inside. 2 frightened eyes stared back, eyes belonging to a 6-year-old boy, cheeks hollow, hair matted, skin blue-tinged from cold. He had been hiding in the crawl space, buried in dust and cobwebs, trembling like a leaf clinging to its branch. "My name's Nathan," he whispered. "We're gonna get you out." The boy didn't speak, didn't cry, just stared with the stare of a child who had learned silence was safer than hope. Nathan slid the board back gently. "Stay quiet. Help is coming." Inside, Clara kicked the door open. "Load the gear." Nathan motioned for Atlas to follow him around the back. The storm thickened, air whipping snow into swirling ghosts. Then, Clara burst out, sprinting toward the trees. Evan followed, hauling the final duffel. "Halverson!" Nathan barked. "They're running. East path." Halverson responded, "Units approaching. Keep eyes on them." Atlas bolted before Nathan could stop him, leaping over a log and tearing through the snow with impossible speed. Clara glanced back, her eyes widening when she realized a German shepherd was closing in. She turned sharply toward a narrow trail, but Atlas cut her off, snarling, tail stiff, paws planted like pillars. Clara stumbled backward. "Get away from me!" Atlas barked, sharp and commanding, blocking every escape angle. For the first time, fear cracked Clara's composure. Evan tried to double back to help her, but police lights flashed through the trees. Halverson and his officers stormed the clearing, weapons raised, voices booming commands. "Hands where we can see them! Down on the ground!" Evan dropped his bag and fell to his knees. Clara froze, breath pluming in frantic bursts. Atlas kept her cornered until 2 officers tackled her. Her scream cut through the cold air, a high, frustrated shriek as her empire collapsed in a single night. Nathan rushed to the cabin, prying the boards up and lifting the boy out carefully. The child clung to him, shaking, finally allowing a soft sob to escape. "You're safe," Nathan whispered, brushing frost from the child's hair. "You're safe now." Atlas trotted back, tail lowering as he pressed his head gently against the boy's leg. The child hesitated, then reached out with a trembling hand and touched Atlas's fur. It was the first moment of warmth in the coldest night of the year. The snow had finally stopped falling by the time Nathan and Atlas returned to Juneau General Hospital, but the world was still wrapped in winter's hush, a quiet so deep it felt almost sacred. Christmas lights shimmered on the eaves, casting warm halos against the frosted glass doors. The night was cold enough to make every breath bloom white, yet the air carried something softer now: relief, victory, the fragile hope of new beginnings. Inside, the hallways were warm with lamplight, humming machines, and the comforting scent of disinfectant mixed with cinnamon cookies brought in by volunteers. Nurses moved with quieter steps than usual, as if they sensed that parts of the world had been rearranged tonight. Nathan walked down the hallway without a sound, boots barely touching the floor. Atlas trotted beside him, tail low, body relaxed at last after hours of tension. But there was something else in Atlas's stride now, a heaviness that came after saving a life. The quiet gratitude of a dog who knew he had done what he was born to do. Nathan gently brushed the fur on Atlas's neck. "You did good, buddy," he murmured. Atlas lifted his eyes, those sharp amber eyes that saw more than most humans did, and let out a soft rumble in reply. Nurse Hannah, a petite woman in her early 40s with warm brown skin and tired kindness etched across her face, spotted them from behind the desk. She'd worked the Christmas shift for 10 straight years, preferring to give younger nurses the night off, though she herself had no family waiting at home. She had lived most of her adult life caring for others, patching up miners, fishermen, and travelers who wandered in from Alaska's unforgiving weather. "Nathan," she whispered, stepping toward him, "they're in room 212. Amelia, she hasn't slept. She's been pacing the floor for hours." Nathan nodded. "Can we go in?" Hannah smiled gently at Atlas. "For that hero?" "Of course." Nathan approached the door. Behind it, he could hear faint sobs, sobs that carried relief, fear, exhaustion, and love all tangled together. He pushed the door open quietly. Inside, Amelia Lane stood beside her daughter's bed. She couldn't have been more than 32, with warm olive skin and dark curls tied in a loose knot. Grief and sleeplessness had carved shadows beneath her eyes, but they couldn't dull the fierce maternal light burning behind them. Amelia worked as a school counselor in Anchorage, a job she cherished, helping children climb out of emotional coldness she herself had experienced growing up in a broken home. Rosie was the piece of her heart she'd sworn never to lose, but 4 days ago, in the blink of a moment, that promise had been shattered. Now, Rosie Lane lay sleeping beneath soft blankets, her breathing steady, her cheeks rosy again. A pink knitted hat covered her tiny head. A small bandage rested on her hand where an IV had been. But her little chest rose and fell with the rhythm of recovery, an ordinary motion made extraordinary by how close she had come to losing it. Amelia turned when she heard footsteps. When she saw Nathan, and then Atlas, her knees buckled slightly. "You brought her home," she whispered, voice breaking. "You really brought her home." Nathan didn't speak. He simply stepped aside, letting Atlas move forward. The dog padded softly toward the bed, nose lifted. As if sensing a familiar presence through sleep, Rosie stirred, eyelids fluttering like butterfly wings. Then her eyes opened, blue-gray, gentle, innocent. The silence broke. "Doggy." She sat up with weak, wobbly arms and reached for Atlas. Nathan barely had time to catch his breath before Atlas moved, paws lifting carefully onto the bed, lowering his head until Rosie's small arms wrapped around his neck. She buried her face in his fur, trembling not with fear this time, but with a child's pure gratitude. Amelia pressed a hand to her lips, tears streaming freely. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you." Nathan's throat tightened. Scenes flashed through his mind. Small villages torn by war. Children he couldn't save. Nights when he and Atlas found only silence where a heartbeat should have been. But tonight, here in this small hospital room, one life was saved. And maybe that was enough. Atlas shifted carefully, letting Rosie press her cheek against his warm fur. Her tiny fingers clutched one of his ears, the way children often held onto stuffed animals. But this protector was real, breathing, living, watching over her with the fierce loyalty of a guardian born from battlefields. Amelia stepped closer. "I don't know how to thank you enough." "Atlas did most of it," Nathan replied softly. Amelia knelt, brushing Rosie's cheek. "You saved her too. You both did." Her voice trembled. "I prayed every night, every hour, that God would send someone, and he sent you." Nathan looked away, a mix of humility and conflict flickering across his face. He did not see himself as a savior. He saw a man who had failed too many times before. But Amelia's words softened something inside him, something long burdened by guilt. A knock sounded on the door. Agent Catherine Drew, the FBI liaison flown in from Anchorage, stepped inside. In her mid-40s, tall and sharp-featured with salt and pepper hair pulled into a bun, she exuded a no-nonsense authority shaped by years tracking interstate trafficking rings. Her icy blue eyes softened only when she took in the sight of Rosie hugging Atlas. "Catherine," Nathan greeted. "Any updates?" She nodded. "Clara's in custody. Evan's talking already. This wasn't their only operation. We'll need a full sweep, from Skagway to Prince Rupert. Are you sure you want in on this?" Nathan inhaled slowly. He had promised himself he'd return home tonight. His mother had left him 3 voicemails asking if he'd make it for Christmas dinner. But as he stood in this room, with Atlas watching over a child who might have died in the dark, he knew the truth. Home wasn't just a place. It was a responsibility, a calling. Atlas lifted his head, as if reading Nathan's thoughts, then turned to look at him with deep, knowing eyes. Nathan exhaled. "Yeah, I'm in. Just tell me where you need us." Catherine smiled faintly. "Good. We'll debrief tomorrow." She paused, softening just slightly. "Go easy tonight. You've earned it." She left, closing the door quietly. Nathan moved to the window. Outside the hospital, Christmas lights flickered in reds, greens, and golds, tiny embers glowing through the winter night. Snowflakes drifted lazily now, peaceful after the violence of the storm. Amelia stepped beside him. "You're not going home tonight, are you?" Nathan shook his head. "There's more work to do." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Then, thank you for choosing to stay, for others, for her, for children who still need saving." Nathan didn't answer, but Amelia understood the silence. Some men were born to fight, others were born to protect. Nathan Cole and Atlas were both. Behind them, Rosie giggled softly, tugging gently on Atlas's ear. The dog lay beside her bed, head resting near her hand, body curled in a protective arch around her tiny form. It was the gentlest the soldier dog had looked in years. Nathan turned, taking in the scene, the child he saved, the mother soothed by hope, the dog whose loyalty never wavered, and felt something shift inside him. Not redemption, not yet, but something like it. Maybe this was his Christmas, not at home, not at a dinner table, but here, in the quiet glow of a hospital room, where light finally reached a place darkness tried to claim. When Nathan finally stepped out of the hospital room, Christmas lights shimmered across the snowy parking lot, and Atlas padded quietly beside him, his breath curling in the cold air. Behind them, Rosie slept safely in her mother's arms, a life reclaimed from the shadows because one dog refused to walk past a silent suitcase, and one soldier chose to stay when it mattered. In the end, it wasn't strength or training that saved her. It was compassion. It was instinct. It was the simple truth that every life, no matter how small, deserves someone who won't look away. And sometimes heroes arrive on 4 paws before they ever arrive in uniform. As you finish this story, I want to ask you something. Do you believe dogs can sense the things we miss, the danger we overlook, the pain we fail to hear? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read everyone. If this story touched your heart, please like the video. And if you want more tales of courage, loyalty, and the moments that remind us what kindness can save, make sure to subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. See you in the next one.